Thank you very much, Andres. I think what was said by both Vladimir and other Vladimir and then by Leonid is true. And I would like to, first of all, draw your attention and everyone's attention to several things that I find particularly important in everything that was said. First and foremost of all, it's what Vladimir said about developments, and both Vladimirs actually said about developments in the regions. This is also my experience before COVID. As you know, I traveled quite extensively too in the Russian regions. And I think that something, and I think we discussed it once or before Christmas probably with you. One thing that has to be taken into account when you look at a potential of change in Russia is that really the age of global information and social media has changed in many ways how the political minority, which is always important, or politicized minority or politically active minority, which is always important in any country, but extremely important in authoritarian countries, how this minority in Russia perceives itself. And what I find really interesting is that basically in terms of agenda, in terms of understanding things, there is not much difference between, I don't know, university adjunct professor or student in Khabarovsk and someone in Moscow. I'm talking about those who are engaged, who want to know, because the main thing is for people to want to learn things, because there's enough information around for you to learn about what really happens in Russia or in Belarus for that matter. So I think that there's this bridge, which I think Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Milov, and their team has really managed to a large extent contribute to building, which links, there are many bridges actually, that links, especially people in 17, 18 million plus cities in Russia. They have one agenda. They have more or less universal understanding about what's wrong. They have different views of how to heal it, because political Russia is diverse. You have anyone from neo-Marxists to monarchists. But basically, I think there's a central ground which says something has to be done about fairer redistribution of wealth, definitely curtailing corruption, curtailing the omnipotence of the security services and secret police, and introducing a system of justice which can be called such, courts, judges and things like that. So I think that this is more or less something that unites the politically minded people in Russia. That's number one. Number two, and this is what basically the two Vladimirs and Leonid mentioned. I think this is basically not at all still part of thinking in the European Union. The last call that Leonid made, for the West to stand strong and so on. Look, we heard it dozens of times, hundreds of times. We heard it after the invasion of Georgia. We heard it when they were beating up protesters in 2012 in Moscow. We heard it after Boris Nemtsov was murdered. We heard it after the Crimea. We heard it after Donbass. We heard it after MH17. We keep hearing about it all the time. And there is definitely, I think, a moment of truth now, in many ways, because the resolutions that were adopted on both Belarus and the attempted murders, it rightly should be called, of Alexei Navalny, seem to be finally probably eliciting some debate about what's actually going on. And what is very important, these debates and these resolutions introduce a matter of, moral political judgment into what used to be just very abstract debates about either, in the case of Navalny, the eternally doomed to authoritarianism Russia with its national character, or about Belarus, which is an insignificant country which is in Russia's orbit anyway. I think that if these resolutions manage to impress the executive powers in the EU, and wider in the world, that will be a very, very important moment of change. And I would like to say that what I think to some extent Gosman touched upon, it's very important in the eyes of the Russian leadership, current Russian leadership, for its interlocutors to look strong. In a very pre-Second World War, probably even pre-First World War meaning of the word. And I think that this is something that's ultimately lacking until now, apart from, I don't know, Lithuania, Estonia, the Czech Republic, Poland, and so on and so forth. I think that to a large extent, dealing with Russia at the age when its leadership is becoming inexorably old, when its people become increasingly restless, not for any particular reason, but just because this regime has been around for 20 years and has been corrupting the life of Russia for such a long time. Because memories of the Soviet Union, the hardships of the 90s, which were very instrumental in bringing the current clique to power, because these memories fade. And the young students I talk to in Russia are, I mean, they don't know what it is. All these things portend an emerging crisis of the Putin system. I mean, the crisis is there, but I mean, a crisis which will be visible to everyone. Khabarovsk is, I think, the first, Первая ласточка, the first sparrow of that. But basically, this system can't give anything new to the Russian people. It can't renew itself. So it is sliding towards a crisis, which may explode anytime the way Belarus exploded, under a pretext that we can't even imagine today. And I'm afraid that European Union is not ready for it. There are still these perceptions that you have to go softly because Putin is so bloody powerful, they can break anyone's neck. And because we know Russia is very important for us in Syria and Iran and where else. I think that as long as this narrative persists, and alas, it persists in Berlin and in Paris, it will actually not only facilitate Putin's rule, but it will keep Europe unprepared for the moment things start to shift. And this moment is historic. I mean, even if you look at Putin's own so-called constitution, Russia now is a country without constitution, as I think Volodya Kara-Murza has shown very, very brightly. Even by his own standards, 2024 will be a major watershed for Putin. He will have to decide what he does. Does he want to stay on and on and on until he's 86, actually? It's an aging regime. People don't understand it. And I think that these resolutions move, at least morally, move the European Union closer to doing things which I think have to be done. One thing I find extremely interesting and extremely politically sharp is the idea that emerged to start sanctioning all those heroes, quote unquote, of Alexei's investigations. Not trying to find yet another Captain so-and-so who probably was sometime related to the chemical weapons facility in Russia and who probably is not even planning to travel to the West and never did and never will. It is the luminaries of the regime that are responsible for creating the situation, which allows for chemical warfare being waged on Russia's own citizens. So I think that taking it a step further and starting to basically stopping, rather, paying attention to the sensitivities of all these wonderful people. Another thing would be, I think, quite good, is that is a difficult thing, I know. But if you look at the Council of Europe, which is not your patch in many ways, but still, stop treating Russian MPs as MPs. They are not MPs. I know there's this idea that eventually when things start to crumble, maybe these people will be very useful and suddenly they will turn their coats. Yes, they will. But to do that, you have to basically show them that there is a very unpleasant choice in their lives. Otherwise, if you keep receiving Pushkovs of this world and pretend that they're elected, you are making a travesty not of Russia. I mean, Russian system is a travesty of itself. You're making a joke of yourself. Number three, I think that's very important. There needs to be a consistent pressure campaign by the European parliamentarians, the pressuring European governments to take action, to take significant action. Make sure that your resolutions count for something. Look at even when I looked at the ayes and nays at the vote roll call on Navalny. It's interesting. Even Identity and Democracy has a few, which is supposed to be like a Russian agentura there. Even some of them voted for the resolution. So that means it's a very powerful thing. But if you just adopt them and then move on to something else, I understand you have a lot of work. But this is an important element. Keep up the public pressure on your governments. They will listen to you. Not probably in the case of Lithuania, Estonia, or the Czech Republic, but we're talking about specific capitals in the EU where this campaign is being waged. Another point, which is very important. Take to task the Russian diplomats that are doing stuff like Ambassador Chizhov in Brussels, saying that, we only poison people who are over whatever, 10% rating in our country. I mean, tell them to their faces that this is unacceptable, to use a diplomatic language. I think that basically it's very important to have, as in the corporate world, you adopt a plan, you have to work on it. Then this has to be your plan. By the way, regarding Belarus is the same. I think that lots of mistakes were committed, much more mistakes were committed with regard to Belarus in the last few weeks than with regard to reaction to Navalny, where I think even Chancellor Merkel finally woke up and felt that, right, I mean, there's some irregularities happening in Russia. I think that with Belarus, you have to overcome decades of the country being thought of as just yet another oblast of Russia. And of course, when the EU bigwigs say, we are not going to sanction Lukashenko no matter what, they're taking off the table a very important instrument of diplomacy and of political influencing. I think that I understand that to a large extent the problem is that basically the European Union knows nothing about Belarus and about the actors there, because there's only one actor there. Turns out there are more. But I suppose that, especially looking across the border as I do now, Belarus is a very important thing, a very important case, because what you see there, you see people that are really, really inflamed or pushed forward or rejuvenated by ideas that ostensibly form the basis of the European Union. I think that it's very important that Belarusians are seen as Europeans, as not as an appendage of the Kremlin. I also think that what actually today, as we speak, President Duda and President Nausėda are doing by saying we are going to probably have our own set of sanctions if the European Union drags its feet. It is also important. That's leadership, how I see it. And I suppose that on Belarus, it's very, very important not to succumb to the Russian narrative and to anything that the Kremlin will cook up with Lukashenko. I think in the coming months, probably, that's trying to answer part of Ruslanos's question. On, alleged closer cooperation or, I don't know, managing, uniting, amalgamating, say, the fiscal system and the tax system, which is Putin's dream, as far as I understand. All these integration initiatives should not at all be recognized because Lukashenko is not a president of Belarus today. I think that this is probably one of the first steps to make with regard to Belarus. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of help to civic society. People will be able to travel, will be able to set up their homes if they want to emigrate. There's going to be all these kind of humanitarian elements. I mean, you MEPs are good at doing that. But I think that the overall political strategy should be based on non-recognition of anything that this former government, former leader, is and are doing in Belarus. These are my kind of first reactions. To quickly answer what Ruslana said, look, if only Ruslana, if I only knew what will happen in Belarus or in Russia, even in 1 year, I would be an extremely successful blue chip trader on because I would have such powers of prediction. I don't. But I think that there is an important element which I'm trying to draw attention to over the last couple of years. And those of you who, I mean, we were at different conferences, different fora, you know it. I think that the important thing to understand is that societies are tired of these regimes, both in Russia and in Belarus even more. Yes, in theory, Lukashenko can put down this revolt by blood or by wearing it down. But I think that the attitude has changed forever. There is a point of no return has been passed. That means that you can have more repression, but also, I think, more resistance by the Belarusians. I suppose we may have something akin to a solidarity moment there, meaning solidarity, like Polish solidarity. And looking at what happens, say, at the big plants, at the big factories, maybe there are people there who will be akin to Valencia. I mean, nothing repeats itself in history exactly, but it's very clear, and I think one needs to pay attention to that this is a society which is much more united, and in some ways even more united than the Russian society. Because you will have the IT hipsters walking to the street, going to the street with pensioners, and with this kind of tractor production line, tractor plant workers. This is a real civic solidarity. One has to pay attention to that. I actually think that maybe if you look forward, Putin is not looking to completely annex Belarus, because then he will have someone described it, I will say it in Russian first, Россия уже граната, а к ней еще присоединят белорусский запал. If you have this sort of amalgamation of Belarus protest with the Russian protest, I don't think he wants it. But it's not that expensive. It's not a question of money. I think it's more a question of having Belarus as a separate thing is much more, notionally at least, it's much more profitable for him than having it as another oblast or several oblasts inside Russia.